Hi, Wolf again. This is the third and last in a series of tutorials, brief sort of cover of the existing terraforming tools. And my aim with these is to familiarise you with not only what the tools do, but how to use them to best effect. That might seem an odd thing to do since I'm releasing a terraforming kit, but I'd like you to have the options of understanding how those tools work, because I believe that the most effective, creative way to work with landscaping is to use a combination of both. So the Terraballs are brilliant for doing precise work. The brushes, the huge sort of mega brush in the Terraballs kit, is really good for raising mountains and things, but if you can get used to using particularly the flatten tool and the smoothing tool effectively, then you can use the Terraballs for sort of chunkier kind of big work and very precise work, and complement that by using the existing terraforming tools. So what we're left looking at now is the smooth tool, which I said we wanted to cover in some detail. So we have our mountain that we've been working on, our sort of flat plateau on the top, and we have a little sort of concave area there that we carved out with the flatten tool, and a couple of random spikes that created when I was showing you the danger of using the tools from the side. Okay, so this is a really good example to show you when you use the smooth tool. What matters here is how big that area is. It's very tempting to think, well, I want to smooth, so I've got my mountain over here, and I think that I want to sort of smooth the edge of this little sort of rise here. I quite like that it rises up. It was an accident, but I do quite like it. So I want to smooth that. Okay, it's very, very simple to just sort of go into smooth and think, okay, it's a bit bigger than that, so I want to smooth over sort of like that kind of an area, and you click your mouse button and where'd it go? It's gone. All you wanted to do was smooth it off. You didn't want to get rid of it, and as it is, you actually smoothed half of your mountain as well. A lot of people find this very frustrating, and again, those that haven't given up already will generally give up at that point, because all they wanted to do was take the sharp edges off something. The trick is it's all in the brush size with the smooth tool. Okay, if you crank it all the way up to big and you put it over an area and think, right, what I'd like to do is smooth the edges off this mountain here, so I quite like the little rise here, but I want it to look smoother and not so jagged. I'm going to use the big brush because it will cover the whole thing, and bam, before you know it, your mountain's gone. Use a small brush. Drop it down to small, because what you're going to do is work it over the area. Okay, you've got to be thinking in terms of using brushes. You wouldn't go and paint the Mona Lisa with the same brush you'd paint a wall in your house. The same is true in using the smoothing tool, and to a large extent a lot of the other tools as well. Don't be tempted to use a bigger brush to make the work go faster or to cover a bigger area because you think this is the whole thing I want to do. I'm going to stop trying to drum it into you at this point. I think you get the message, but let me show you. What I want to do is take the jagged edge off around the edge of my mountain here, but I don't want to flatten my mountain, and I don't want it to suddenly start smoothing back into the landscape, so I'm going to take it down to the tiniest brush size I can, all the way down the bottom, tiny little brush, and then I'm going to move that over here. Okay, it's a little bit slow, but it's doing what I want it to do, and it's all to do with that area, because what you're telling it to do is to take a sort of an average. It's not going to make it's not a mathematical average, but it's that kind of an effect. What you're asking it to do is to smooth out based on the area within that square that you're dragging around on the ground. So if you make it bigger than your whole mountain, it looks at all of that and says, okay, well, the average sort of gentle sort of smooth bump of that would be a little bump in the ground, and bam, your mountain's gone. Okay, so if you make it a small brush, then all it's looking at, the only area that it will affect is right under the brush. So this little bump on our plateau here, just gently smooth it out. And you can see, although the area around it is, well, I call it twitching, landscaping is not a precise thing, especially on steep slopes or changes in gradient. So the top of cliffs and the bottom of valleys and that sort of thing, where it changes very quickly in the angle of the ground, it gets very, very bumpy. I can show you an example of that better, where I've cut out pathways in the mountain using the Terraballs over here. Now, when you actually walk across that terrain here, it looks incredibly bumpy. I'll put myself up there so you can see me in the landscape. it looks very, very bumpy, but if you notice when I'm walking through it, it's actually quite smooth. And what that is, it's an artifact, if you like. It's because the terraforming is done on it's effectively done on a 4 meter by 4 meter square, and it takes sort of averages within that, but it doesn't know what to do in cases where, for example, I have a steep cliff on one side going up and a steep cliff on the other side going down. So all this stuff on top, it's like noise. It's like visual noise. So you've got a very, very bumpy terrain. Now there's nothing you can do about it. It's actually quite smooth to walk over, but visually it's quite rough. Okay, so in reference to the smoothing tool, it's worth mentioning that, because you are never going to get areas like that path to be completely smooth. It works better on areas with steep cliffs going in the same direction either side. So for example, this looks much, much smoother where we've got steep cliffs on either side of it that way, but it really, really struggles when you've got it going up on one side and down on the other. Okay, so remember that brush size. That's really, really important. So I think that's about it. There's a lot more detail that you can learn about the terraforming tools. There's a lot of technical detail you can learn about how they work, but I think that gives a fair overview of the power of the tools and some of the dangers of using them. Okay, so remember, particularly the flatten tool can be used to create all sorts of details that aren't flat at all, and the smoothing tool, the thing to most remember about that one is small brush sizes. Okay, don't use a big brush to make it quicker. You'll flatten the whole thing and obliterate mountains wholesale. Okay, I'll move on to the tutorials now about actually using the Terraballs and what they do. Thanks a lot for listening.